Ever noticed how the more we're encouraged to share every detail of our lives, the more powerless we sometimes feel? This isn't just social anxiety, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of where true personal power originates. Welcome to what I call the connection paradox. In an age of unprecedented digital transparency, the individuals who thrive are often those who have mastered the ancient art of strategic silence. For centuries, Stoic philosophers understood something that our modern oversharing culture has forgotten. Not all knowledge is meant for public consumption. From Seneca's guarded correspondence to Marcus Aurelius's private meditations, the greatest Stoics practiced discretion not as deception, but as a form of self-preservation and strength cultivation. They recognized that certain aspects of our inner world, our plans, vulnerabilities, failures, and triumphs, lose their transformative power when broadcast prematurely. This comprehensive guide will take you far beyond the simple list of things not to say and into the psychological architecture of personal power. We're going to explore not just what to keep private, but why these particular aspects of your life are so vulnerable, and how protecting them fundamentally changes your psychology, your decision-making, and your impact on the world. More importantly, we'll examine how to transform silence from mere absence of speech into an active, powerful presence. By the end of this deep exploration, you'll understand how to build what I term your internal fortress, a psychological structure that protects your energy, focuses your efforts, and allows your achievements to speak with undeniable authority. This isn't about becoming secretive or paranoid. It's about becoming strategically discerning in a world that constantly demands your transparency. Your journey toward empowered silence begins with understanding one crucial principle. What you withhold defines your power as much as what you express. In the economy of attention, your silence is your most undervalued currency. Let's begin with what happens inside your brain when you share. When you reveal personal information, especially plans, dreams, or vulnerabilities, your brain releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with reward and pleasure. This is the same chemical pathway activated by social media likes and positive feedback. In neurological terms, sharing feels like accomplishment. Your brain interprets social validation as a survival advantage, creating a powerful feedback loop that encourages more disclosure. But here's the psychological cost that neuroscience is only beginning to quantify. Premature verbalization triggers what psychologists call symbolic completion. When you articulate a goal or plan to others, your brain partially registers it as already accomplished. This diminishes the motivational tension, the productive dissatisfaction that drives you to actually complete the work. A 2009 study published in Psychological Science found that people who announced their intentions to others were less likely to follow through, as the social recognition provided premature satisfaction. This creates what I term the dopamine drain. You're trading the substantial long-term satisfaction of actual achievement for the fleeting, shallow pleasure of social acknowledgement. Every time you announce a plan before its fruition, you're literally borrowing motivation from your future self, often at unsustainable interest rates. The Stoic alternative is what I call motivational integrity, maintaining the complete circuit between intention, action, and result within your own consciousness. This preserves the psychological tension necessary for genuine accomplishment while protecting your intentions from the diluting effects of external validation. Human relationships operate on complex economies of information exchange. Every piece of personal data you release enters this economy with specific value and vulnerability. When you reveal a weakness, you're not just sharing information, you're establishing a power dynamic. Even among friends and colleagues, this revelation subtly alters how others perceive and interact with you. Social psychologists identify what's called the disclosure reciprocity norm, the unconscious expectation that disclosures will be met with equivalent disclosures. When you share strategically valuable information, like plans or vulnerabilities, you create subtle pressure on others to match your level of openness, often beyond what serves either party. This can transform authentic connection into transactional vulnerability. More dangerously, in professional or competitive environments, your disclosures create what negotiation experts call information asymmetry. The party with more information typically holds more power. By revealing your pressures, timelines, or uncertainties, you're voluntarily reducing your position in this asymmetry. You're giving away pieces of your strategic advantage, sometimes to those who may not have your best interests at heart. The Stoic practice involves recalibrating your relationship with this information economy. It means learning to distinguish between connective disclosure, which builds mutual understanding, strategic disclosure, which serves a specific purpose, and leaked power, which diminishes your position without benefit. Most modern oversharing falls into the third category, the accidental leakage of personal power through unexamined verbal habits. The first step toward reclaiming that power is understanding exactly what types of information are most vulnerable to this leakage, which brings us to our 6 guarded domains. Your plans in their formative stage are like seeds that must germinate in darkness. This isn't just poetic metaphor, it's psychological necessity. When an idea first emerges, it exists in what creativity researchers call a provisional state. Fragile, unformed, highly susceptible to external influence. Sharing it at this stage exposes it to several destructive forces. First, premature criticism. Others will inevitably evaluate your nascent plan through their own frameworks, experiences, and limitations. Their skepticism, however well-intentioned, introduces doubt during the most vulnerable phase of development. Second, social expectations. Once announced, your plan enters what sociologists term the accountability web. People will remember and ask about it, creating pressure that can distort your natural pace and process. You begin working for an audience rather than for the integrity of the work itself. Third, energy diffusion. As discussed in the neuroscience section, the dopamine reward from announcement reduces the psychic energy available for actual execution. You've released the tension that drives creation. The Stoic alternative involves creating what I call a silent incubation chamber for your ambitions. This is both a psychological space and a practical process. Phase 1 is sovereign conception. For the first week, keep the idea completely private. Journal about it, sketch it, but don't speak it. Allow it to develop according to its own internal logic, not external validation. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private meditations, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." During this phase, you're allowing the idea to dye your thinking without dilution. Phase 2 is structured development. Over the next few weeks, begin creating tangible structures, outlines, prototypes, plans, but maintain strict confidentiality. Tell no one. This builds what psychologists call implementation intention, the specific linking of situations with actions. Research shows that keeping these intentions private makes them more resilient. Phase 3 is stealth execution. After a month or more, begin taking action while maintaining operational security. This isn't about deception. It's about protecting the creative process from the distorting effects of observation. As the idea moves toward manifestation, your confidence grows from tangible progress rather than social approval. The transition from silent incubation to public revelation should occur naturally at the point of tangible evidence. When your work can speak for itself, it enters the world with inherent authority that no announcement could ever provide. An idea announced is a promise. An idea realized is a fact. Here lies one of the most misunderstood aspects of personal growth. Your weaknesses are not conversation topics, they're private construction sites. Modern therapy culture and vulnerability movements have created a dangerous conflation between therapeutic disclosure, which happens in controlled, confidential settings, and casual revelation in social or professional contexts. When you casually reveal a weakness, saying things like, "I'm terrible with deadlines," or "I struggle with confidence," or "I'm working on my temper," you accomplish several counterproductive things. First, you create a social label. Humans naturally categorize and label for cognitive efficiency. Your confessed weakness becomes part of your social identity in others' minds. Future behaviors will be interpreted through this lens, often in ways that reinforce the very pattern you're trying to change. Second, you establish low expectations. In professional settings especially, revealed weaknesses become the baseline against which you're measured. You've voluntarily lowered the bar, and exceeding it becomes labeled as improvement rather than expected competence. Third, you invite unqualified help. People will offer advice, often projecting their own issues onto your situation. This creates noise that drowns out your own developing intuition about what you actually need. The Stoic approach recognizes a crucial distinction between acknowledging a weakness to yourself and announcing it to others. The former is essential for growth, the latter is often detrimental to it. Instead, create what I term your private development ledger. Step 1 is precise diagnosis. Without euphemism or drama, identify the exact nature of the weakness. Is it a skill deficit, an emotional pattern, a knowledge gap? Write this down in clinical, non-judgmental language. The Roman Stoics called this seeing things as they are, without the coloring of emotion or social concern. Step 2 is silent strategy development. Design your improvement plan with the same seriousness you would bring to a confidential business strategy. What specific actions will address this? What resources do you need? What timeline makes sense? This plan exists only in your private records. Step 3 is covert implementation. Execute your plan without fanfare. If you're working on public speaking, join a group like Toastmasters without telling your colleagues. If you're improving technical skills, take online courses quietly. The improvement becomes noticeable only through changed results, not through announced intentions. Step 4 is private measurement. Track progress in your private development ledger. Note setbacks without drama and adjustments without announcement. The entire process remains sovereign territory. When others eventually notice your improvement, and they will, it carries the weight of demonstrated change rather than the lightness of stated intention. They witness not someone working on a weakness, but someone who has transcended it. This shift in perception is profound and permanent. Your failures contain your most valuable lessons, but they're written in a code that only you can fully decipher. The modern inclination to share our failure stories as inspiration or connection often commits what I call the translation error, assuming that the meaning we've extracted from our experiences can be fully transmitted to others. Consider this psychological reality. Memory is reconstructive, not reproductive. Every time you recall and narrate a failure, you're not playing back a recording. You're constructing a story shaped by your current emotional state, audience, and objectives. With each retelling, the raw data of the experience becomes further processed, often losing precisely the uncomfortable details that contain the most potent lessons. The Stoic practice involves treating failures as what I term case studies in sovereign learning. Principle 1 is the 48-hour confidential analysis period. Immediately following a setback, institute a mandatory period of complete silence about it. No discussions, no venting, no social media posts. During this time, conduct what the Stoics called hysteresis, a deliberate examination of causes and effects. Write in a private journal what exactly happened, stripped of emotion and valuation. What were my actual decisions versus external factors? What specific knowledge or preparation was missing? What would I do differently with this knowledge? This process extracts the nutritional value from the experience before social processing dilutes it. Principle 2 is the distinction between lesson and story. Once you've extracted the lesson, you now possess two distinct things: the private lesson, which is the actual insight that improves future decisions, and the potential story, which is the narrative version that might serve social purposes. The Stoic recognizes that these are different entities with different purposes. The private lesson goes into your mental toolkit, immediately applied to current decisions. The story, if shared at all, is released only with strategic intent. To mentor someone in a similar situation, to illustrate a specific point, or to demonstrate a completed transformation, it is never shared as emotional catharsis or social bonding currency. Principle 3 is contextual containment. Some failures belong to specific contexts and should remain there. A professional setback might yield lessons applicable only in that domain. Sharing it socially or in different professional contexts creates unnecessary vulnerability without corresponding benefit. The Stoic practices contextual sovereignty, allowing different areas of life to have their own private learning histories. The ultimate test is this: when you can reference a past failure without emotional charge, as clinically as a surgeon discussing a difficult procedure, you know the lesson has been fully integrated and the story is no longer running you. At this point, selective sharing becomes possible without power loss. There exists a special energy in creation that is dissipated by observation. This is not superstition, but psychological physics. When you're building something significant, whether a business, a creative work, or a personal transformation, the phase between conception and tangible proof is what military strategists call the vulnerability window. During this period, your project exists more in potential than in reality. It's sustained by vision, effort, and faith, all of which are vulnerable to external skepticism, unwanted advice, and the subtle pressure of others' expectations. What we're protecting here is not just the idea itself, but the psychological conditions necessary for its execution. The Stoic approach involves implementing what I term phased revelation strategy. Phase alpha is complete stealth, from 0 to 30% completion. The project is known only to you. During this phase, you're answering fundamental questions. Is this viable? Do I have the resources? What's the core architecture? This is the period of maximum flexibility and minimum ego attachment, precisely because no one else knows. You can pivot, adjust, or even abandon without social consequence. Phase beta is minimal essential disclosure, from 30 to 70% completion. You reveal the project only to those whose specific participation is essential, and only to the extent necessary. This isn't about secrecy for its own sake, but about minimum viable disclosure, sharing exactly what's needed for collaboration, no more. Each person sees only their piece of the puzzle, preserving the overall strategic advantage. Phase gamma is calculated revelation, from 70 to 90% completion. As the project reaches substantial completion, you begin controlled disclosure to build anticipation or secure necessary support. Even here, the Stoic maintains what's called information asymmetry advantage. You know more about the project's true scope and readiness than anyone outside the core team. Phase delta is public revelation through results, from 90 to 100% completion. The work itself is now the primary communication. Instead of announcing what I'm doing, you're presenting what I've done. This shift from future promise to present reality transforms the psychological dynamic completely. You're no longer seeking approval for an idea. You're presenting evidence of execution. Throughout this process, the Stoic cultivates what ancient philosophers called apatheia, not apathy, but freedom from disruptive passions. This means working without the need for constant validation, without fear of others' opinions, and without attachment to specific outcomes. The work proceeds according to its own logic and timeline, protected from the distorting influence of social performance. Every person contains what mystics called the aditum, the innermost sanctuary that should never be profaned by casual entry. Modern psychology confirms this intuitive wisdom. We all have core truths, experiences, and aspects of identity that form the foundation of our psychological integrity. These aren't necessarily shameful or dramatic. They're simply sacred in the sense of being essential to our coherence. The problem with casual or premature sharing of these core truths is what psychologists term integration disruption. When you reveal something fundamental about yourself, you're not just sharing information. You're inviting that aspect of yourself into the social space where it becomes subject to others' perceptions, judgments, and interpretations. Consider the 3 types of inner truths that require special protection. Type 1 is formative experiences. These are events or relationships that shaped your fundamental worldview. Sharing them often leads to others trying to interpret or contextualize them through their own frameworks, potentially distorting the meaning these experiences hold for you. Type 2 is core vulnerabilities. Different from developmental weaknesses, these are aspects of your being that simply are, sensitivities, fears, or needs that are intrinsic to your nature. Exposing these doesn't lead to improvement, as with skills, but to potential exploitation or unintentional harm. Type 3 is private convictions, your deepest beliefs about life, purpose, or morality that aren't necessarily for public debate. Once vocalized, they enter the marketplace of ideas where they can be challenged, diluted, or used to categorize you in limiting ways. The Stoic practice involves creating what I call concentric circles of disclosure. The innermost circle is for you alone. It contains your unprocessed experiences, raw emotions, and developing understandings. Nothing leaves this circle until it has been sufficiently processed to maintain its integrity in social space. The second circle is for sacred relationships. Maybe 1 to 3 people in a lifetime qualify for this level of access. These are individuals who have demonstrated the wisdom, discretion, and unconditional positive regard to handle your core truths without distorting them. The third circle is for functional disclosure. This is information shared for specific purposes with clear boundaries. This might include sharing relevant background with a therapist or mentor, but with explicit context about why and how the information should be used. The outer circle is for general social interaction. This is the curated version of yourself that engages with the wider world. This isn't inauthentic, it's appropriately bounded. The power in this structure comes from intentionality. You're not hiding from connection. You're choosing the conditions under which your most vulnerable aspects are exposed. As Epictetus taught, if you wish to be invincible, never contend with anything that is not within your control. Your private truths, until shared, remain completely within your control. Money remains one of the most emotionally charged and socially complicated aspects of modern life, precisely why it demands maximum discretion. When you disclose specific financial information, income, net worth, investments, or even purchases, you're not just sharing numbers. You're inviting others into a complex psychological and relational dynamic. Consider what actually happens when financial transparency becomes casual. First, you become a data point in others' comparison. algorithms. Humans naturally compare, especially around resources. Your disclosed numbers become reference points in others' assessments of their own success, creating unnecessary envy or superiority dynamics that poison relationships. Second, you invite unqualified financial judgment. People will evaluate your financial decisions through their own risk tolerance, values, and knowledge, which may be dramatically different from yours. The vacation you saved 5 years for becomes labeled as extravagant to someone with different priorities. Third, you create relational distortions. Money inherently affects power dynamics. Disclosing specifics can create awkwardness in friendships, family relationships, and professional connections that were previously based on other grounds. Fourth, you increase vulnerability to manipulation. From friendly requests for loans to targeted marketing to social engineering, financial transparency has real security implications. The Stoic alternative involves practicing what I term financial opacity with strategic clarity. Principle 1 is the veil of generalization. Instead of specific numbers, speak in generalities when financial matters must be discussed. Say things like, "I'm comfortable," or "I'm being careful with expenses this year," or "I'm investing in my education." These communicate your position without providing ammunition for comparison or judgment. Principle 2 is decoupling financial decisions from social explanation. Make financial choices based on your values and goals, not social expectations. More importantly, don't explain or justify these decisions socially. The minimalist car, the modest home, the expensive hobby, none require social justification if they serve your sovereign financial plan. Principle 3 is creating mystery as a social buffer. When others don't know your specifics, they're forced to relate to you as a person rather than a financial profile. This mystery creates healthy social distance that protects relationships from monetary contamination. As Seneca noted, money has never yet made anyone rich, meaning true wealth is in self-sufficiency, not in numbers that can be compared. Principle 4 is establishing a confidential financial counsel. Have 1 or 2 absolutely trusted advisors like a financial planner, mentor, or partner with whom you discuss specifics. This provides the necessary reality check and advice without exposing your situation to the broader social world. The ultimate goal is what the Stoics called autarkeia, self-sufficiency. This doesn't mean having infinite resources, but having your sense of security and worth completely independent of both your financial status and others' knowledge of it. Your financial life becomes a private garden. Others might see the wall and guess at what's inside, but only you walk its paths and enjoy its fruits. Understanding these principles is one thing. Living them requires deliberate practice. What follows is a structured approach to integrating Stoic discretion into your daily life without becoming secretive or isolated. We'll call it the 30-Day Sovereignty Challenge. Week 1 is for awareness and audit. On days 1 through 3, carry a small notebook. Tally every instance you share personal information. No judgment, just observation. On days 4 through 7, categorize these shares using our 6 domains. Which type of information are you disclosing most frequently? In what contexts? Week 2 is for strategic replacement. From day 8 to 14 for each category of disclosure, develop alternative responses. Instead of sharing a plan, say, "I'm exploring some ideas." Instead of revealing a weakness, say, "That's an area I'm developing." Practice these in low-stakes situations. Week 3 is for energy reclamation. From day 15 to 21, notice the psychological difference. Where previously you sought validation through sharing, now you're building validation through action. Journal about the energy you're reclaiming. Week 4 is for integration. From day 22 to 30, your new patterns become more natural. You begin to feel the power of what you're not saying, You notice others responding differently to you, with more curiosity, respect, or genuine interest rather than casual familiarity. You will face pressure to disclose, especially from those accustomed to your previous transparency. Mastering graceful deflection is essential. These aren't lies or evasions, but respectful boundaries. For probing questions about plans, you might say, "I appreciate your interest. I'm in a development phase right now and will share when there's something concrete to show." Or, "I've learned that ideas need protected space to grow. I'll definitely update you when it's time." For questions about personal matters, try, "That's something I prefer to keep private, but I value your concern." Or, "I'm handling that in my own way. Thank you for understanding." The key is to be firm but warm, clear but not defensive. You're teaching people how to respect your boundaries through consistent, graceful enforcement. The digital world presents special challenges and opportunities for practicing strategic silence. For your social media strategy, share accomplishments, not ambitions. Post finished work, not works in progress. Express general values, not specific vulnerabilities. And remember, the internet is not your diary or your therapist. For digital communication, use delayed sending to avoid emotional disclosures. Assume anything digital could eventually become public, and cultivate the habit of asking, "Why am I sharing this?" before every post or message. The goal is digital presence without digital vulnerability, being seen without being exposed. Strategic silence is not absolute. Wisdom knows when disclosure itself becomes powerful. There are calculated moments when sharing serves your sovereignty. First, to establish authority. Once you've achieved mastery in an area, sharing your journey, including failures, demonstrates the depth of your experience. Second, to create connection with purpose. In mentoring or deep relationships, selective disclosure builds the trust necessary for meaningful impact. Third, to neutralize potential attacks. Sometimes preemptively sharing a vulnerability disarms those who might use it against you. Fourth, to solidify learning. Teaching what you've mastered requires sharing the process, but from a position of completion rather than seeking. The difference is always in the positioning. Are you sharing from need or from abundance? From seeking validation or offering value? From vulnerability or strength? The goal of Stoic discretion is empowered connection, not isolation. We must guard against swinging from oversharing to emotional isolation. Healthy indicators you're on track include feeling more energy for meaningful work, having relationships deepen with those who respect boundaries, experiencing less anxiety about others' opinions, and feeling your achievements are more authentically yours. Warning signs of imbalance include avoiding all vulnerability, feeling disconnected from genuine community, using discretion as avoidance of intimacy, or becoming rigid rather than discerning. The Stoic ideal is the fortress with a drawbridge. Strong boundaries with deliberate chosen openings. Different contexts require different applications of these principles. In corporate settings, discretion protects strategic advantage and professional reputation. Share only what serves the project and your role. In creative communities, protect the fragile early stages of creation while participating fully in critique and collaboration at appropriate phases. In family dynamics, balance privacy with connection, recognizing that family patterns may challenge new boundaries gently but consistently. In romantic relationships, develop graduated intimacy, sharing appropriately to the depth of commitment and demonstrated trustworthiness. The principle remains consistent. Sovereignty over your inner world. The application varies with wisdom. We began with a question about why sharing sometimes drains our power. We've explored the psychological, social, and practical dimensions of what happens when we reclaim sovereignty over our inner world. The journey towards Stoic discretion isn't about becoming more secretive. It's about becoming more substantive. It's the difference between a building with impressive scaffolding, all announcements sharing and seeking validation, and a building that stands on its completed foundation of results, demonstrated character, and quiet confidence. As you implement these practices, you'll notice a fundamental shift. Your sense of worth and security becomes increasingly internal. You're less buffeted by social winds, less drained by performance anxiety, more focused on meaningful creation. Others may notice you speak less but accomplish more. They may find you somewhat mysterious yet undeniably substantial. This is the sound of your own authority emerging, not in loud proclamation but in quiet achievement, not in promises made but in promises kept, not in vulnerabilities shared but in strengths demonstrated. In the economy of human attention, your silence is the rarest currency. Spend it wisely. Your assignment, should you choose to accept it. For the next 7 days, protect one thing from each of our 6 categories. Notice what happens to your energy, your focus, your sense of self. Observe how others respond to the slightly more substantial, slightly less accessible version of you that emerges. The quiet isn't empty space, it's incubation space. What will you grow there? If this deep dive into Stoic power resonates with you, hit the like button. It helps guide the algorithm to others who need this message. For more comprehensive guides to applying ancient wisdom to modern life, subscribe to Stoic Mindset Mastery. Your journey toward unshakable inner strength continues with each choice for sovereignty.